I just want to start this video out by saying I'm sorry. This is probably the most toxic build that I've made on my channel so far. Please don't hate me for it. Do you want to get your super first every game? Do you want to know the secret of how to get a lot of supers every game? The build that I want to show you today actually has a little bit of a backstory. It all began when I interviewed my bakery brother Pattycakes. We were talking about how some builds are just extremely superior to others. For example, how the Revenant Hunter overshadowed almost all other Hunter subclasses. We came to the conclusion that amongst the Warlock subclasses, one of the most annoying to deal with was the Chaos Reach. The middle tree Stormcaller Warlock, together with the exotic boots Geomag Stabilizers, allows you to get supers incredibly fast. In endgame modes like Trials of Osiris, this super basically equates to at least one free kill, and that can often grow over into a free round 1. While the neutral game of this subclass is somewhat mediocre, the pure quantity of supers that you can get is enough to outweigh any shortcomings of the subclass. Let me put this in perspective for you. At base, with Geomags and 100 intellect, the time required to get just one super if you did absolutely nothing but run is about 3 minutes and 10 seconds. This is already 40 seconds faster than any other light-based subclass, which would need about 3 minutes and 50 seconds to fully charge the super at 100 intellect. And stasis subclasses have even longer ability cooldowns. To charge a behemoth super at max intellect, you're going to need a full 4 minutes. So getting your Chaos Reach so fast is really good, but there's actually more. You can cancel your super after getting a kill by re-clicking your super button, and that's going to retain up to about 30% of your super energy. This is even after the recent nerf to Chaos Reach. With your super now already charged about a third of the way, you just need to wait until around a quarter is remaining, swap to those Geomags, and you can get another super just by running. If your enemy is playing Behemoth Titan at say 7 intellect, you're essentially able to get 2 supers for every 1 super that your enemy gets. So you can immediately see the value of running 100 intellect with this build. Now the question is, how can I make the Chaos Reach build even more effective and more dominant? In order for you to understand how I landed on this build, let's think about what we want to put together in order to maximize the Chaos Reach subclass. I've prepared a shopping list, so to speak, with the pieces that we need to assemble for this build, and later I'll talk about a few alternatives. Priority number 1 is to get a lot of supers. We also want to compensate as much as possible for the neutral game, which is somewhat mediocre. Next, we want to be able to punish those aggressive players, but also those more campy passive playstyles. And finally, we want to be a good support player for our teammates who may be utilizing other builds with other classes. So now that you know what we're looking for, let me explain to you how I expanded the Chaos Reach build. The end result here is a bit complex, so bear with me. If you stick to the end, I'll show you some variations on this build so that you can adapt what I've made to suit your playstyle the best. Here's a quick reminder of the neutral game perks for Chaos Reach. For new viewers, neutral game here refers to how strong a subclass is before it gets its super. Chaos Reach is actually quite a fun kit. First off, there's the passive boost Pulse Wave. Whenever you're at red bar health, you'll get this buff to proc for both you and your allies. This will grant you a massive increase to reload speed, handling speed, and a small buff to movement speed, which is actually quite awesome to have. Some 120 RPM hand cannons have horrible reload speeds, and being able to suddenly get a massive boost to the reload is really nice. Also, if your shotgun doesn't happen to have quick draw, getting to that red bar health essentially gives you the same benefit for free. You also have a very cool passive ability called Ionic Traces. These are little lines of energy that flow to you after you get a kill, and when you collect them, it charges your abilities even faster, including your super. Your melee on Chaos Reach is actually a ranged melee, which is sort of like a floating proximity mine. It deals 70 damage and the explosion is mostly vertical. This means that the melee is perfectly suited to be blasted above a Titan barricade or behind cover. Also, since it hovers in the air for a few moments, it can be pretty easily pre-fired into hallways to lead an engagement. My favorite way to use this melee is in combination with the Storm Grenade, where I throw the melee first and then the grenade quickly afterwards. This combination can be extremely effective against enemies who are hiding behind cover, and it leads to quite a few kills if you use it well. Think of it as the Warlock's Wombo Combo attack. As with any build, let's consider our exotic armor choice. For the last 20% of our super, it's basically a no-brainer to swap over to the exotic boots Geomag Stabilizers. As you might already know, these give you about the last 20% of your supercharge for free, all you have to do is run. And they can extend the length of your super if you're able to land a few hits, which is really nice because that means we might be able to cut it off a little bit sooner and still retain a big portion of that super to get our next one faster. Also, while wearing Geomags, the Chaos Reach super has the ability to defeat those pesky Titan bubbles very easily. However, we aren't required to use Geomags for the first 80% of our super, where they're not really providing us any value. So let's take a look at our shopping list. Remember that at the number 1 spot, we want a lot of supers. So how else can we generate a bunch of supers faster? Okay, so we can use the Dynamo mod on our helmet. That's pretty easy. This gives us some super energy when we pop our rift near an enemy. Pro tip, by the way, I would recommend only doing this from behind cover or safety. We could also use a weapon like the Bad Juju, which gives bonus super energy on kill with the String of Curses perk. However, the 450 RPM lightweight pulses are generally horrible, and unfortunately Bad Juju is, well, kinda bad. So that might hurt us more than it actually helps us. We could also use the Crown of Tempest exotic helmet to get that super energy off of arc kills, which is certainly another viable option here. While the Wombo combo I mentioned earlier can be quite strong, would you really want to go toe-to-toe with your abilities on a Stormcaller versus a Stasis Revenant Hunter? Personally, I'd be shivering. Where Crown of Tempest can potentially come into play, however, is this a super sweaty exotic swap where you'd switch over to it just before activating your super. If you get a kill during your super and cancel it, you'll get just a little bit of extra super energy for free. But I'm not even sure that it's really worth switching to that compared to just sticking on the Geomags. An alternative to the Crown of Tempest would be the new chest exotic armor, Mantle of Battle Harmony, which now also works in PvP. This is a viable option, especially if we plan to use an arc weapon. However, this exotic is most effective when you actually have your super charged already. In my opinion, this build is meant for you to use your super as much as possible so that you can start charging your next one. The last option that I wanted to look at is the Nezarec Sin, and now we're cooking. For the simple requirements of just getting a void kill, Nezarec Sin will grant us a small chunk of energy to all of our abilities, including our super. It's kind of difficult to test this exactly, but as far as I can tell, each void kill gives you about 4 seconds off of your super with Nezarecs. Yeah, I know this is not a lot, however it is the easiest way to get super back a little bit faster, and all it requires is landing some kills with a void weapon, and luckily we have quite a few excellent options these days. Remember that on average, the time to get a super after canceling one early and then running around wearing the Geomags is somewhere around 2 minutes, so a couple of seconds here and there can really start to add up. And remember, this does stack on top of those Ionic Traces after you get a kill. Nezarec Sin doubles as a neutral game boost as well because it gives us our other abilities back faster, so we're already working on another point of that shopping list too. If you still aren't sold on the Nezarec, I'll have some other alternative options for you at the end. Now that we have our armor choices fixed, let's check out what void weapons we might want to use with this build. Fortunately, Season of the Chosen has brought many void weapons which are all excellent options for this build. Up first is a recent community favorite, the Frozen Orbit, which is a high impact sniper rifle. Remember, if you get a damage booster like an Empowering Rift, you can kill your opponent with just a body shot if they have less than 50 resilience. We also have the Retold Tale and the Retro Futurist shotguns, which are both decent choices for CQC play, although probably neither are truly a competitor to the Fellwinter's Lie. And if you're into slug shotguns, you also have the Bone Chiller. Where I see this build really starting to shine with potential is when I look at some of the recent Void primary weapons that have been added to the game. We have both the Palindrome and the Bottom Dollar, which are two absolutely fantastic hand cannons. Outside of these, we have the Premonition and the Last Perdition, which are both very good pulse rifles with a lot of awesome perk combinations, and if you're into auto rifles, the Gnawing Hunger still absolutely shreds with the right roll. If grenade launchers are more your thing, first of all, I'm a little bit disappointed in you, but the Orb Ring Small and the Truth Teller are both void options. And finally, the Fighting Lion is void if you want to run the good old Snipe Lion combo popularized by my buddy Pattycakes. Whatever weapons you choose, all that's left to do is to polish off the build, but first we need to pick a heavy weapon. If you're into machine guns, you can go with the Commemoration from the Deepstone Crypt raid, which has become pretty much my go-to legendary machine gun these days. Alternatively, you can also use a void sword like the Black Talon and fling swords of death at your foes. Or one of my personal favorite exotics, the Deathbringer. Just gonna shoot that there, see what happens. Hey, got one. I got 3, 4! Okay. If you want to get your Rift as often as possible in order to proc that Dynamo more often, you might want to think about using a Wellspring weapon. Conveniently, the Bottom Dollar is one option with Wellspring. And now for the cherry on top of the pancake. Depending on what kind of weapons you choose to use, you can augment this build with those Charge with Light mods. The most generic would be to use the following mods: Taking Charge, Stacks on Stacks, Radiant Light, Powerful Friends, and High Energy Fire. The idea here is that every time you or a teammate pops a super, everyone on your team gets charged with light, which enables that Bottom Dollar hand cannon to 2-tap for the next kill thanks to the High Energy Fire mod. This can become very annoying very fast. Even if you don't manage to get any kills with your super, you'll give your entire team the ability to 2-tap with their 120 RPM hand cannon, and you'll also grant those high impact sniper users the ability to one-shot body shot enemies who are under 50 resilience. If anyone still uses the Arbalest, that will body shot too. With a damage boost, you're going to be able to win those 1vx situations more often, which means you're producing more orbs and again feeding that cycle of charge with light. If we have any stats that are above 100 recovery and 100 intellect that we need to spend, we can think about what pieces of our neutral game we want to boost. I think it makes a lot of sense to go with 50 resilience or higher to be able to survive that 1 headshot 2 body shot combo from those meta 120 hand cannons. Also, it's perfectly fine to spec into grenade or melee energy so you can throw more of those deadly wombo combos. Depending on what you choose, you may want to go with a bomber, outreach, gauntlet mods, etc. to boost your ability charge even more. Having more abilities in Destiny is always a win. So the cycle of this build goes something like this. You start off the match with no super and just your abilities, and you have the Nezarec Sin equipped. Depending on how your enemies play, you can choose to either try and get void kills to feed Nezarecs, or you can just sit back and play defensively. If your enemy goes to rush you and you end up getting some kills, you're going to have a significantly boosted super recharge rate thanks to Nezarecs, and they're going to put themselves in an extremely nasty position. If they continue to play aggressively without success, they're just feeding you super energy. But if they decide to play passive, you'll start the chain of supers for your team early, since you can just run in place and get your super once you reach that 80% mark thanks to Geomags. As you can see, either way your enemy is in a very difficult position. Once you spend your super and then you cut it off, you can just switch right back to the Nezarecs and begin the process all over again. I would say that Chaos Reach in this particular build is best suited for lower player count activities, meaning things like survival and elimination. In 6v6 modes, I'd recommend running this build a bit differently because opening your menu to swap gear is a bit awkward and extremely risky. These modes tend to be so chaotic that standing still while taking time to swap your armor might just get you killed, so do so at your own risk. However, in modes like Trials or Survival, every second can make a difference, so if you manage to get even a few void kills, you'll get a significant benefit. And even if you don't manage to get any kills whatsoever, you're still going to get that super by default at least 30 seconds before anyone else. And once you get that first super going and then cut it off, every other one will be about a minute faster than anyone else in the game. In game modes like Trials, just one pick can be enough to grant you a free round win, and Chaos is extremely difficult to avoid. This means that you're highly likely to be able to capitalize on that super. As I mentioned before, if you aren't sold on Nezarecs and instead you prefer to boost your neutral game through some speed and easier reloads, I love the Exotic Boots Transversive Steps. These are a great swappable with this build because it's only one slot to change with your Geomags, so you can pull off the swap really fast. However, I would argue that if you're purely interested in a movement-based subclass, you might actually be better suited for the Top Tree Dawnblade, so that you can use that Icarus Dash, which allows you to get out of that slow effect from the Dustfield Grenades. If you're looking for a more general buff to your reload speed and weapon handling, you might also enjoy the Ophidian aspects, which improve both. And finally, if you want more of a funny option, you can try out the Getaway Artist. These are probably more effective than you might think. The way these gloves work is that they produce an arc buddy whenever you eat your grenade, and these fire quite aggressively at anyone that you look at, dealing about 60 damage if all the bolts hit. There's a misconception out there that arc buddies only choose to fire at someone randomly, and this is actually not true. They'll fire at the player who's closest to your reticle position. Also, the Getaway Artist can sort of serve as a makeshift wall hack. They can let you know when someone's around the corner. The little arc friend has 30 meters of range, which is a fair amount, and it's actually kind of hard to evade their little shots with the movement abilities, which means that you'll be able to easily 2-tap any player who's even slightly less mobile. In CQC fights, the Getaway Artist can also give you an upper hand in those shotgun duels. They even enable you to get a kill with a slug shotgun with a body shot because of that extra cleanup damage. Unfortunately, they do lose a lot of effectiveness if your enemy is hyper mobile, and I think at the end of the day, you're probably better off just getting your super back faster with the Nezarecs. So if you like this video, I think you'll really enjoy this interview I did recently with my friend BRAVEXHERO. We talked about how to make better Destiny builds outside of the meta. It's the video over on the top right of your screen.